Good morning. This is Cecil and Blues. Thank you for joining me for another Final Fantasy XIV video. Today I'm going to be taking an in-depth look at the Machinist, one of the 3 new jobs added in Heaven's Ward. Since this is a new job and it has 28 abilities, I will not be covering each one in order, and some I may not cover in full detail. But you should have a clear understanding of the job by the end of the video. Machinist is a ranged physical damage dealer which deals piercing type damage. This is identical to its sister job, the Bard. Machinist also provides much of the same support utility, but before we get into utility, let's talk about the Machinist's primary weapon skills and basic rotation. Hotshot is a 120 potency attack that provides a 5% damage boost for 30 seconds. This buff should always be up. Refresh anytime there is less than 3 seconds remaining. Lead Shot is a 40 potency attack that applies a 45 potency damage over time effect. This effect lasts for 30 seconds, and it should be maintained. It deals a lot of damage over that full 30 seconds. Before moving on to the core direct damage attacks, I want to talk just briefly about what makes these maintenance abilities different from the Bard. Bard is on an 18-second loop, and Machinists are on a 30-second loop. Bards also have 1 buff and 2 dots to maintain, and 3 if you count Flaming Arrow. Machinists have less maintenance, which frees up some brain power to focus on their much more involved set of core attacks. The core attacks consist of the following. Split Shot is a 140 potency attack that has a 50% chance of chaining into Slug Shot. Slug Shot is a 100 potency attack that, if chained, is a 180 potency attack. It also has a 50% chance of chaining into Clean Shot. Clean Shot is a 100 potency attack that, if chained, is a 200 potency attack. Since the proc rate is so unpredictable, it takes a lot of focus to maintain an optimal rotation. You never want to fire Slug Shot or Clean Shot without the chain effect, and a string of bad luck can lead to many globals in a row of just pressing 1. And you'll be doing garbage damage while you do it. Additionally, I found the damage potency for reaching the end of that chain to be really unsatisfying, especially with the random nature of it. Dragoons have a 3-step chain whose final weapon skill is a 360 potency attack. When I reach the final step and fire off a 200 potency attack, I'm not really excited. It's a very mediocre number. It should really feel awesome, but instead it just feels meh. A lot of my complaints about this job are going to come back to how rewarded I feel for getting it right. But for now, let's talk about how to influence that trash tier 50-50 chain attack chance. The skill Reload is on a 60-second cooldown, and it provides you with 5 ammunition. When you fire a weapon skill, 1 ammunition will be consumed. Ammunition increases the attack potency of your weapon skills by 20, and it also changes the percent chance on Split Shot and Slug Shot to 100%. Hot Shot and Lead Shot only get the 20% potency increase to their initial damage. There is no additional benefit provided to either the DOT or the Hot Shot buff. There is also a quick reload skill that is now on a 15-second timer after changes made in patch 3.07. This provides 1 ammunition, but it also restores 30 TP. Ammunition is the Machinist's primary way of controlling their rotation. It removes the unpredictability for 2 cycles. But since it's on a 60-second cooldown, you'll still spend over half the fight at the mercy of RNG. As noted previously, ammo has very little impact on Hot Shot and Lead Shot, but they will still consume the ammunition. So you want to make sure that you have at least 15 seconds remaining on both of these effects before you use Reload to avoid an unoptimal situation. The reduction in cooldown for quick reload does help that dead space for Machinists, providing some consistency to their rotation between full reload actions. As a buff, ammunition falls flat for me. Moving a 50% chance to 100% does make things predictable, which can be nice. But in the back of your mind, you'll always wonder if this was the rotation that would have worked fine without the buff. The damage bonus helps you feel a little bit better, but not significantly. Once again, it doesn't feel satisfying. You don't see that big of an increase. If instead of a 50% proc chain, the development team had gone with a more standard 3-step chain for your core rotation, they could have used the concept of ammunition to do something more interesting. Have it empower more of your abilities in interesting and different ways. As it is, ammunition only serves to keep your machinist consistent while cooldowns are burning. With the standard rotation out of the way, we can talk about the machinist's highest damage dealing ability, Wildfire. This is an instant ability, not a weapon skill, that puts a debuff on your target that lasts 15 seconds. While active, it absorbs 25% of the damage you deal, and when the debuff ends, that damage is dealt to the target. If you line up all your cooldowns, the results are dramatic. The effect, on the other hand, is anything but. There is no final animation, no fanfare as the debuff expires, and that giant amount of damage is applied to the target. Once again, I'm left feeling unsatisfied. Summoners have a big, bursty thing that takes tons of time to set up too, and have you seen the animation for that thing? Meanwhile, Machinist's hardest hitting ability is barely noticeable as it flips by on flying text. That aside, it's all about cooldown stacking. First you'll want to refresh Hotshot and use Lead Shot. Then hypercharge your Rook auto turret, hit reload, and you'll want to activate your cross-class buffs, Blood for Blood, Raging Strikes, Hawk's Eye. Then it's time to plow through your rotation twice. Make sure to activate Rapid Fire at some point to squeeze in a couple of extra attacks, and use Reassemble on your first clean shot, since it'll be boosted from the ammo. You can weave in a Head Graze, a Gauss round, and a Ricochet for some additional damage. You can also squeeze in a quick reload and start a third rotation just as Wildfire expires. Now everything is on cooldown, and you've got a minute and a half to play Will I or Won't I Get a Skill Chain? Most of these cooldowns are on different timers. You only get to use Raging Strikes every other Wildfire. You're also left with the choice of parking a reload for 30 seconds while you wait for your next Wildfire, or parking a Wildfire for 30 seconds while you wait for your next reload. I don't have any good advice for you on this. That level of min-maxing is way above my pay grade. Overall, I find Wildfire to be a frustrating skill. It has literal too good to use syndrome. Many players may not use a cooldown like Blood for Blood on every trash pull because they want to save it for a big fight, for something important. Forgetting that 80 seconds really isn't that long, and in reality you're almost certainly going to have Blood for Blood up when you pull a boss. But Wildfire is almost useless on trash, and that's because 9 times out of 10, the target's going to die before 15 seconds pass. You could mitigate that by deliberately attacking a secondary target, but tanks hate that shit. Alright, I'm getting myself worked up. I'm going to move on. I mentioned some extra things in that last pile of words that I haven't covered yet. Much of them related to utility. Machinists summon turrets instead of singing songs. There are 2 different types of turrets, the Rook, which deals physical damage with a potency of 80 to a single target. This is roughly equal to your auto attack. And the Bishop turret, which deals magical damage in an AoE centered around itself, with a potency of 60. The turrets do not have a pet bar. They will attack whatever target you last used a weapon skill on. It's always safe to pre-drop a Rook turret. It won't start fighting until you do, and for some reason enemy NPCs are not suspicious of them at all. Bishop turrets, on the other hand, cannot be trusted. Turrets cost nothing to summon and are off the global cooldown with no cast time. This is fortunate, because they are a bit fragile and also immobile. So you may find yourself resummoning them multiple times during a single encounter. You can summon a new turret to replace an existing turret. The original turret will unsummon itself. These turrets provide a valuable source of damage that is not insignificant, but the Machinist can sacrifice that damage for utility by using the Promote ability, changing them from damage dealers to buff stations. Maintaining this state will drain the Machinist's MP. The Rook turret will recharge an extra 30 TP per tick while promoted. The Bishop turret will provide a 30 MP refresh potency while promoted. These buffs are identical to their corresponding bard songs with an identical mana cost to the Machinist. The aura is centered around the turret, which could provide some minimal additional positional utility that bards lack. At level 58, Machinists learn a turret cooldown, which doubles their effectiveness for 15 seconds. Hypercharge has a 2-minute cooldown and affects promoted turrets identical to a bard's battle voice, though the effect only lasts for 15 seconds. If used on combat-moded turrets, their damage is doubled, and they will also apply a debuff, lowering the defense to either physical or magical damage, depending on which turret is used. These debuffs have a duration of 10 seconds, so you can expect to get 20 to 25 seconds of uptime every time you use this skill. Bards have the ability to apply a similar debuff to magical defense with Foe Requiem, but they lack a physical defense debuff. There is a lot of overlap between songs and turrets. I can't necessarily say one is objectively better than the other, but they are different from each other in how they are best used. There are some other utility shots that Machinists have at their disposal. Leg Graze and Foot Graze share a 20-second cooldown. One provides a 12-second heavy debuff, the other is a 12-second bind. These abilities do no damage and are simply crowd control. When combined with Blank, a 15-yard knockback with a 30-second recast, and enough space to run around, you can effectively kite almost any single melee target. Blank has a 5-yard range and is meant to fill the same space as a bard's repelling shot. While it has a potency of 100 and it's off the global cooldown, do not use this ability for extra damage if the target is not immune to knockback. Everyone in your group will hate you. Head Graze is a silence with a 25-second cooldown, and it shares a cooldown with Suppressing Fire, which is a stun. Suppressing Fire has a 5-yard range, but Head Graze can be used at your full range of 25 yards. These abilities also have 100 potency and are off the global cooldown. If you plan to use them to do additional damage, ensure that you aren't interfering with a fight mechanic by making a target immune to these effects through diminishing returns. Machinists also have 2 AoE abilities. Spread Shot is a 12-yard frontal cone, dealing 100 potency to all targets for 130 TP. Grenado Shot, in addition to being objectively the silliest named ability in the game, deals 120 potency to a single target and all targets within 5 yards of it for 160 TP. While Grenado Shot deals more damage, it will sink your TP faster. And finally, there's Gauss Barrel. This is essentially a stance like Defiance or Shieldo. When active, it turns off your auto attack and adds a cast time to your weapon skills, but it increases your damage by 30%. It also gives you access to 2 additional instant abilities. The first is Gauss Round, a 180 potency attack with a 20-second cooldown. The other is Ricochet, a 100 potency attack which deals 200 potency damage divided amongst all targets within 5 yards, or if used against a single target, a 300 potency attack. This has a cooldown of 60 seconds. I'm not against the concept of Gauss Barrel in general. I kinda like the idea of a siege mode, but I don't think it's right for all players. In order to really benefit from Gauss Barrel, you need to be nearly perfect on your rotation. The lost damage from your auto attack is nearly equal to the increased damage applied from your weapon skills. You'll gain additional damage through Gauss Round, Ricochet, and even Head Graze and Heartbreak, but overall, if you aren't nearly perfect on your rotation, you'd probably see higher damage through auto attacks. It is my belief that Gauss Barrel is intended to be used by high-end players, and that the average player base should only use it situationally. In AoE situations, it's always a benefit, but from there it's going to depend heavily on your level of play. Some encounters don't require any movement. Some encounters have very predictable movement phases. Don't be bullied or shamed into using it by rude players. If you want to perfect your play, do it at your own pace. There have already been adjustments to Gauss Barrel since the release of Heaven's Ward, increasing its damage bonus and removing its cast time, but I still think that it isn't objectively a damage upgrade for every player. So don't get uppity if you see a machinist in your group who isn't using Gauss Barrel. It could do more harm than good. My final thoughts on Machinists are that it's a challenging job to master with a lot of support tools that overlap with Bard. Because of the high skill cap, the average player is going to underperform when compared to other jobs, and even the highest skilled players are finding that the top end doesn't compare with other DPS jobs. There has been some pushback from the development team on this notion, implying that the player base just hasn't fully learned how to get the most out of Machinist, and that may be true. But I just don't get that heroic feeling when I play like I do other DPS jobs. I also don't feel a distinct identity when I play Machinist. Dragoons, monks, and ninjas are all physical melee jobs, but they feel and play very differently from each other. Summoners and Black Mage are both ranged magic dealers, but they have their own distinct playstyles and identities that separate them. Machinists just feel too much like bards. Even though their core rotation is very different, it fails to create its own identity. Maybe some changes will come down the pipe that will make this job more fun to play, build that identity, but for right now, I'm just going to keep mine parked. Thanks again for watching this video and listening to a casual player take a deep dive on a new job. Please add any feedback or context you'd like in the comments. You can follow this channel to get notified when new videos are uploaded, and you can also follow me on Twitter @itsboats if you'd like to see what else I'm up to. Have a great day!